whatever agent that it was deleted an entire code base. And it's like, that's
How
terrifying.
that happened?
And even though it was told not to do such actions, it did and gone.
It was so good. I had to ask, is this AI? Like, are you a person? Or is this
Yeah.
AI? It actually was a person. It wasn't AI, but the interaction started off as AI. Being in contact center, right? Like being the
Yeah.
contact center whisperer. And
Yes.
I couldn't tell the difference between when it switched. It doesn't matter how great the feature is if it's going to bankrupt your company. I don't care how awesome the AI assistant is going to be if it's going to be, stealing your customer. Hey, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Tipsy Thursdays. I am your show host, Juanita Coley, the CEO and founder of Solid Rock Consulting, also affectionately known as the Contact Center Whisperer. And I am joined back with our repeat guest for season 6, Shmuel. Shmuel, thank you so much for being here with us. I am so excited because the first time I talked to you, I was like, we got to talk again. Like
Yeah.
we have to do another episode. So I'm super excited to have you back on Tipsy Thursdays. And this time we're talking about AI regulation, AI governance, how AI is democratizing and removing barriers. So you brought this topic up and I was
Yeah.
like, we have to talk about it. So I'm going to let you jump right in. But before you do, for the people who didn't catch the previous episode, tell the people your name, your title, where you at, what organization you're at, and kind of what your day-to-day looks like before we jump into this AI conversation.
Of course. Yeah. So thank you so much for having me back. Yeah. I had so much fun last time. And we were like just back and forth. And we are like, oh my God, yeah, we got to talk about this. So yeah, just quickly. So my name is Shmuel Saklad. I am one of the senior managers in the enterprise accounts department at B&H Photo. So we are focusing on the B2B clients that B&H serves. And so I'm in an inbound B2B contact center. So we are supporting all of the inbound work, inbound requests from customers that are either purchasing equipment they already purchased and now they need the support from our people. And that's really what we're about. We're about the experience. We're about one of the things I really love saying is that transactions obviously are important and critical. They got to be right. But the interactions themselves are way more important, right? Like, yes, it's important that you get your stuff when you want it, but we all remember how we feel after we leave. Yeah, after we walk out the door, after we finish that call, do I feel, oh, they got me. They
Yeah.
they took care of me, or they were like, or you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I have to deal with that again.
Right.
So that's what we really focus on is that feeling that people are going to walk away with, and how can we do that?
You say that, that reminds me of a saying, and it's definitely not mine, but it sticks out to me. People may not remember what you did, but they'll
Yes, yes.
remember how you made them feel. And I'm sure
I
butchering that, but
no, no, yeah, I think that's it. But that's
I,
exactly it. Yeah,
yeah.
I think
So that's what
that
made
all the
me think of
time.
that. Yeah. When you first came on, we were talking about, so this season, for season 6, we're talking about, of course, the show is Tipsy Thursday. So the goal of the show is always to share a tip with the leader and help amplify voices that I feel like are impactful in the space and are actually I think we hear enough from people
Work.
who are not in the space that are just kind of like they're
Yes.
thought leaders, they're talking big concepts, but they're not actually they've never had to actually do the thing. So on the
Mhm.
show, I love to get people who are doing the thing, talking about the thing, right? I think it's so many lessons you can learn. And so last show, we were talking about what's one of the big things that you started leveraging AI for? What are some of the big takeaways and one tip you had for people? And one of the things that came up in the show was AI governance and regulations. And that was one of the big things. And I was like, man, we don't even have time to go into all of that. Today,
Yeah.
we do.
Yes,
So,
we do.
so let's talk about it. What is one of the big challenges you're seeing around AI regulations, and how are you trying to combat that right now
Yeah.
in practice in the organization you're in?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, again, we're still a little, slow. We're taking our time, with implementing AI and really thinking about what is our use case and what is our real business, proposition and how we want to apply that. But, what's definitely I see a lot when I talk to other practitioners and I talk to other people in the space is this idea of, governance and regulation, right? So they're two obviously very, very different aspects of it. But, if we talk governance first, it's like, well, what are you doing? What access is it going to have to your systems? Especially depending on the industry that you're in, whether you're in a financial industry, banking, healthcare, like
Yeah,
highly regulated with
really
personal
matters.
information. Yeah. Like you have to be super, super careful. And even in every industry where you're dealing with PII information, right? Like personal identifying information, names, dates, birthdays, whatever, addresses, even in a regular in contact centers in general, you have to be careful about that information. And certainly, when you're talking about AI, it's like, it's next level, right? Like it is now going to have access potentially to your data. And what are you doing with that? What are your guardrails? Someone I was talking to was talking about, are you going to give it read only, right? View only access? Are you going to allow it to write information back to your systems and your connectors? And if you're analyzing survey data, right, like that's a huge talk right now, right? Not even the surveys, but your whole conversational data, your phone recordings, your transcriptions, your email communications, your chats, all of that contains data, and you have to be really careful about what you're giving it access to, and you're scrubbing it to make sure you're removing any potential issues that could come up. And I think this is obviously a fast developing field, and there I think are just going to be some challenges where people really need to think about, look a little bit ahead to say what potential issues might there be, and how are we protecting ourselves and our customers if we're thinking, 1, 2, 3 years down the road when regulation will eventually catch up. It will take some time, as we see, just from history of regulation taking time to actually catch up with what's happening, in the modern day. Like you talk about big tobacco, you talk about social media, you talk about, right, those things took years or decades to catch up, but it will eventually. And
Mhm.
how are you setting yourself up today to protect yourself for when that does happen?
How are you thinking about when you're thinking about taking AI back into the organization and assessing where you can use what's the use cases for AI?
Hmm.
You said something that really kind of did a light bulb moment in my head while you were saying it. You were saying about, will you give AI access to read only,
Hmm.
write, certain things like that. But at a certain point, it's like, is it any good if it can't do? Like if,
Yeah.
if we give it only read access, then if it can't act, right, then
Right. It's a good point, right? And I'll give you some examples that I was thinking or I heard about. So, where let's say you have your Gmail, you have your Slack, you have maybe Teams, you have, 5 different places you may get updates and information. You can have Claude or whatever your platform is have access to those data points and send you a morning update of what came in overnight. What do I need to know to start my day?
uh-huh,
Right? Read my emails, read my Slack notifications, read my wherever else updates and different platforms and systems. Tell me what is priority number one, so I know how to plan my day, right? Like, so that's a great use case for,
right.
it doesn't need to do anything else. It just needs to tell me. Now I can take action on it.
Filter through all
Mhm.
the minutia, because there's so many different
I'm
notifications, so
like,
many things. Yeah.
I've heard people using it, like creating agents as like chief of staff to like monitor like other agents. And I'm like, this, it's really wild.
So here's the thing that I'm always having conversation around. AI is not new, right? AI and automation
Right,
is
right.
not a new thing. It's the new features and functionality and the
Yeah.
capability of AI that has really grown and scaled and have really brought a lot of new use cases to light, right? Like, oh, wow, we couldn't do this before. So while
Yeah.
AI and automation isn't new, because there is such a heightened use case in functionality and capability, I think that this is the conversation that's, sparking interest in everybody's minds about regulatory compliance
Yeah.
and, getting past those types of things. Are you a business owner or a CX leader running a center without a dedicated WFM team? Well, maybe you may have one person on the ops side covering the whole function. Or maybe your WFM team actually sits inside of your BPO, but not on your side. And that's not on you, it's a structural gap. but it means you're making calls and strategic plays, likely missing service level or overstaffed and bleeding budget without anyone dedicated to reading your data, turning it into insights that align with your CX strategy. So we're doing something about it. 100 free data analysis and strategic workforce assessments where we look at your phone data, your forecasts, your schedules, and intraday performance. And in 72 hours, we hand you back real answers, not a pitch deck, just the insight that a dedicated WFM leader would normally give you. I did this for a client named Sabina. She was running 3 contact centers operating at a 59% service level. And within 60 days of her data insights, we moved her from a 59% service level to an 82% service level. And what mattered most is that she got her evenings back. She got her time back. She stopped doubting her data, and she actually had a strategy that aligned to her CX strategy. This is completely free. We're doing it for 100 leaders between now and September 15th. So if you are a CX leader and you're running a center between 50 to 5,000 employees, you have your phone data, you don't have a WFM team, I highly recommend that you take your data, turn it into insights, and you apply below and let us help you. See you soon. How do you think organizations or vendors or Claude or different, suppliers of AI make someone like yourself, an operator, more comfortable about AI regulations and governance and those type of things? How would they go about saying, "Hey, Shmuel, this is what we're doing, and this is
Right.
how we're considering compliance and governance, and you're safe with us"? What would that take?
What are going to be standards? Like, what are we basing it on, right? Like, so every company potentially could be doing whatever they believe is the right approach. So maybe, even having, let's talk an ideal, right? Having some of the big companies get together and say, these are the standards that we're going to operate on. These are the security implementations we're going to do, the type of level of security, and this is how we're going to do it. I think some of it comes down to, speaking the tech a little bit. Some of it comes down to demos, right? Like, here's the case of somebody sent in their information. This is what we do to make sure that we don't transfer any of that, potentially PII or PCI
Uh-huh.
information to the system, right? This is how it, like now when you use your credit card on your phone, right? You tap to pay, way more secure than, swiping your card or even inserting your card into the readers, right? Like, it has these unique tokens that they connect to and it recognizes. So, like, and there is some level of standardization around that. So that's a potential, way where connecting our system that we know we've given it certain identifiers to know, oh, this is this customer, but we're not going to potentially transfer some of that information back and forth. That's like one interesting idea.
Yeah, and what I really gleaned from that is standardization, right? Vendors
Yeah,
need to be able to talk through what their standardization process is around compliance, governance,
yeah,
and how they keep your information safe and secure.
yeah,
And that is one of the, comfort zones, right? Level of comfort to say,
yeah,
okay, this is one of the barriers to entry inside of our organization
yeah,
is, do you have a standardization process? I think that's what I kind of gleaned from what you
100%.
said. Yeah.
Yeah, and like thinking about an interesting use case where somebody was just telling me about where, let's say you could think out where, like, I'd say I'm a sales agent, right? Or I work on a sales team. I get my leads from Salesforce, whatever your CRM is. Okay, so I have to log into my system, get my leads, reach out and contact them. Theoretically, now you can have where you just talk to Claude or ChatGPT. It has those connectors. It feeds you the data that you need, gives you everything that you need, contact information, the lead opportunity, and potentially then you tell it, contact this person, send them an email. And all of it is done in the platform. You're not even logging into the other systems anymore. Thinking about the opportunity, it's pretty huge. But yeah, the risk is also there. And how are
So
you
that was
gonna?
going to be my question to you. Does the
Yeah,
opportunity outweigh the weigh the risk? Does the opportunity that AI brings to you, the ability to scale and
yeah,
get more customers, serve your customer better, become more profitable, does the opportunity in the frontier of that outweigh the risk
Yeah.
that or the fears that you as an operator have?
That's definitely something that every company is going to have to make their choices. For
Mm.
me, I think, yeah, it's really cool, but terrifying in the same way. I don't know if you saw recently, it was a pretty recent headline where whatever agent that it was deleted an entire code base. And it's like, that's
How
terrifying.
that happened?
Yeah. Because I don't know, remember all the details of it, but it's like, it made that decision. And even though it was told not to do such actions, it did. And gone. So you have to like, what kind of backups do you have? Are you keeping them on the same locations or are they in different locations? So these are things that need to be thought about because yeah, there are real risks. And what we really need is an overarching standard and guidelines and frameworks. But certainly in the US, it's not going to happen for a long time. We're seeing some of that now in Europe, right? There's policies that are going in place over the couple months, I think, right, in August, where there are pretty strict standards on what you can do and how you have to identify, are you a person, are you an agent, and what you can do with that information. So, I mean, Europe's always been a little bit ahead in that way with, think about GDPR and on those types of
Yeah,
regulations.
there are a lot more. I'm actually in Europe now, and we were having a talk about this the other day. The differences between US and Europe around AI adoption and the moving forward.
Hmm.
And, someone asked me this question, what are the differences? My honest answer is that, typically I see from US leaders tend to be more aggressive, opportunity outweigh risk.
Yeah.
We'll kind of jump in feet first and figure it out, paddle like the
Yeah.
underwater, figure some stuff out.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
Whereas when I'm talking to Europe, customers and leaders, they're a lot more risk averse. They're more
Yeah.
thoughtful,
Thinking about the
and
privacy. Yeah.
planful in their approach. They are thinking through kind of like all of things, which again can be a good or bad thing, right? Because it can put you behind.
Totally.
There's a saying, we say study long, study wrong, right? Like,
Right.
so it depends on, what your tolerance is
Yeah.
for risk, which is what made me ask you that question. Like, does opportunity outweigh risk? Or, you know,
Yeah.
at what point do you say, hey, we have to, it's almost like anything that we've discovered, any great discovery, any great invention, it came at the cost, right? Or at the
Yeah.
risk of exposure. It came at the cost of failing.
Yeah.
It came at the cost of, the unknown. So I think
Yeah.
with AI, while we definitely most certainly 1,100%, I can't even give it any more credence
I
than
know.
that, right? We
Yeah.
have to most certainly have risk, compliance, governance, those type of things. But I also think AI is here. So we also have
Yeah.
to be like, okay, how do we assess risk and how do we still bring AI into our organizations to where we're staying ahead? Because if you don't, someone else will. Right,
Oh,
like,
totally. Right.
if you're not bringing it in and considering it as a part of your labor pool, someone else is considering it a part of their labor pool, and they're beating you to
Oh, yeah.
the customer, they're beating you to
Yeah.
the revenue, they're beating you to how they service their customer,
Mhm.
and you're getting left behind. So I think
Yeah.
while we definitely have to do a better job and be very intentful when it comes to governance, risk, and thinking through those things, at some point we have to assess, okay, does the opportunity and reward
Right.
outweigh the risk?
I agree. I agree. Definitely agree with you. And it's definitely like that challenge, right? The opportunity versus risk. And it is here to stay. Like, can't deny it. Right? It's not going away at this point. So you have to really think about it and get on board in some fashion, right? Obviously, I definitely believe also you have to be thoughtful, mindful, planful. You have to be just aware and know what's going on, right? And think about it of what makes sense and what am I really trying to accomplish? Am I trying to do what's best for our customer? Are you dollars first? Are you customer first? Or like where do you fall in the lines of those values? And also, I think clarity and communication back to your customer about it. Right? Like people just
Yes.
want to know what's going on, right? Like I'm okay if I speak to AI agent, it's fine, right? But as long as I get that good experience and it's not being hidden from me, I think that's also something that's important.
Man, I was on the phone, Shmuel, the other day with the AI was so good. As a
So
matter of fact, it was so good. I had to ask, is this AI? Like, are you a person or is this
yeah,
AI? And it actually was a person. It wasn't AI, but the interaction started off as AI. And so I
got it.
couldn't even being in contact center, right? Like being the
Yeah,
contact center whisperer. And I
yes,
couldn't tell the difference between when it switched. When did the interaction switch from it was matter of fact, it was my daughter, she was calling to get insurance, right? So I was helping her out with that interaction. The AI was so good. I could
yeah,
not tell when it switched from AI to the actual person that I was talking to
yeah.
on the phone being a human, that I actually literally had to ask. I was like, "Hey, are you AI?" And the lady was kind of confused. She was like, "No, I'm a person." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm just I was trying not to be offensive, right?
Yeah,
Because I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm in the contact center industry, and so I'm used to
so funny.
engaging with AI and humans, and I literally
Yeah,
could not tell when we switch talking from the AI to the human.
it's
That's
they're really good.
insane.
Yeah, they're really good. But yeah, so it's a funny story, right? Like, and sometimes you really don't know. But I think it comes back to, are you getting a good experience or not? And I think, people will care less if it is AI as long as they get their issue resolved in a
That's the
timely,
thing.
efficient manner. Yeah.
That's the thing. We got the policy, right? Everything got paid for. We got, if it wasn't for me interrupting the call, like and saying, "Hey, are you?" Because my daughter was talking, and I was like, my daughter was handling everything. I just was
Yeah.
intrigued because I was like, this sounds like AI, but I'm not sure. Because
Yeah.
it's very like conversational in tone, like, and all the different things. And lo and behold, it wasn't AI, but who we were
Really
talking
funny.
to originally was AI. So I was
Right.
like, when did it switch? And so I
Yeah.
think that's the ultimate thing. That's the barometer right there. Like, was the issue solved? It was. We got the policy, all was well, payments were made, and she's insured. Watch, hide your, kids and all the other things
Yes.
on the road, right? But
That's perfect.
but
Yeah.
but the ultimate goal of us calling was accomplished. So did I care if it was outside of being nosy, right? Did I care that I was talking to a human or AI? No, not really.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. That's a good point.
yeah.
But it's going to be interesting, right? Like as it continues to get better, and it will, you're right. You really might not know. And how are we dealing with that as a society?
Yeah.
And what is our messaging and how are we influencing that? Because we all play a role in that acceptance and messaging.
And I think it was really interesting because I couldn't tell, again, being an experienced contact center person,
Mhm.
when we switched from AI to a human, what it started to make me think of is what was the trigger? Like,
Right.
what did we say that made AI say, "Oh, I
Yeah.
need to pass this to a human needs to be in the loop,"
Right.
right?
That's it.
So I think those are the things. And so again, shout out to I don't, they're not paying me for no sponsorship, so I'm not gonna say the company name, right? But and
Yeah.
I don't want to get them in trouble because I don't know if it's a thing or
Yeah.
not. But shout out to them because it was the triggers were in place to know
Yeah.
clearly something we said triggered the system to say,
Mhm.
"Oh, let me pass you to a human agent." And it did it in
Mhm.
such a way that it wasn't disruptive to the customer experience at all, right?
Right.
It just transferred me over. I didn't even realize, right, that I was
Right.
being transferred or moved. And the customer could say that's a good or a bad thing, right? But for us, again, the situation was taken care of. So
Right.
that interaction highlighted a lot of different things for me, right? Like, do customers have their knowledge bases up to date to where if
Mm.
they're leveraging AI agents, that it can service the call to whatever point it needs to
Yeah.
trigger that transition to have the human in the loop.
Yeah.
And maybe it knew that we needed a policy and payment was going to be involved. And so that was the
Right. A
compliance piece
trigger.
to
Yeah.
say, "Hey, transfer us over to an agent." But while we're
Yeah.
talking about the conversation, the reason that made me think about this interaction is because we're talking about the conversation about AI and risk and governance and
Yeah.
compliance. Maybe it's the organization that needs to have these triggers in place and need to have their
Yeah.
data in such a way, formatted in such a way that says, "Hey, at this point, we need to transfer over to a human."
Right. Right.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
That's the thing. Wait, once it involves payment or money, credit card information, like things like that, which are, definitely sensitive information. That's a good point. It probably was one of those things that's like, all right, now we gotta move on. And you're right, good for them for thinking of it and having that in place. And clearly like the way that, the agent clearly didn't have to ask you any questions, right? It knew the context and knew all of that. Right, like that's the worst when you get someone, they're like, "What are you calling about?" And you're like, "Oh my
And
God, I
that's why
told
I
you."
didn't know if it was a human or not, because typically when you're transferred from AI to a human, a lot of times they're asking you back the questions you just talked to in the IVR or with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
agent. Like, oh, can you validate you? Like, I just did that. What's the point of me
right,
doing it over there? And so she just
right.
picks right up to where from wherever we left off on the, talking about, hey, we need the policy, we need this, and third, to where I'm like, are we still with AI? Like, are you AI? And she's
Right.
like, huh? No, no, I'm not, and I was like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. you know?
That's so
So,
funny.
but absolutely 1000%. On this note, because I'll talk to you all day again, right?
Yeah,
But
I know.
on this note, what do you think is next for AI risk compliance? If you had to give a piece of advice, we always ask this as the last question. If you had to give a piece of
Yeah,
advice, what would be that piece of advice to a leader that's saying, hey, I am concerned about risk. I am concerned about compliance, governance, but I also have this mandate to bring
right.
in AI as a part of my workforce. What would be your piece of advice?
Yeah, I think I would say it's really important if you're looking at the different vendors and different solutions that you ask real, like important questions about this. What are they doing with this data? Like, right, if they're ingesting your calls or your emails, what data are they using to train the models? Right? Are they using your data? Is it anonymized? Like, what are they doing to scrub the PII out of it? I think that's a really important question. And I think just in general, like what's their stance and can they give you any documentation about it? Can they tell you how they're going about these, risks and governance? And then once you know what they're doing, okay, now it's time to decide what we're doing, right? And how are we thinking about that as a
Mm.
business? And who needs to be at a seat at the table? Right? Do we need our compliance leaders? We need our, you know, finance leaders, whoever it may be, to think about potential risks and that we need to be aware of and just how are we as a business making those executive decisions.
Yeah, asking those right questions, making sure we get the right parties involved at the table,
Yes.
that can help us to assess the risk for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being our repeat guest for
Yes.
season 6 of Tipsy Thursdays. I am so, so excited that you decided to come back on the show. Always such a great time talking to you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, well, there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in to season 6 of Tipsy Thursdays. As what you heard, Shmuel talk about today around AI governance risk, right? Sometimes that risk is going to outweigh the opportunity, but I think what we really need to be looking at is we need to assess that. When does opportunity outweigh the risk, and when does risk outweigh the opportunity? There are a lot of things that are happening in the space. There are a lot of vendors that are entering the space and slapping AI on the back of their name. So the tip that he gave around knowing which questions to ask, making sure you have the right people at the table, whether it's the compliance leader in your organization, CIO, CTO, because it doesn't matter how great the feature is if it's going to bankrupt your company, right? Like I don't care how awesome the AI assistant is going to be if it's going to be, stealing your customers' data and bankrupting your company. So the risk outweigh the opportunity. So again, those were some amazing tips that Shmuel shared with us. Until next time, you already know what to do. Go be great and let's make impact. See you guys soon. Bye.